In the year 326 BC, there was no single vast empire in the Punjab region of India, but a multitude of small states. Most of them were in constant conflict with their neighbors. One such state was ruled by King Purav. He controlled the region between the rivers Jhelum and Chenab in modern-day Pakistan. In the same year, Alexander invaded Punjab, and after crossing the river Indus, he arrived at Taxila. Umbi, the king of Taxila, received him in a friendly manner. While he was there, many nearby states sent their envoys, accompanied with precious presents. Alexander also called upon Purav to pay tribute and meet him at his own frontier, expecting he too would bend the knee like others. Purav, however, answered that he would indeed meet him, but in a battle. Alexander felt insulted and now wanted to crush Purav's spirit. Alexander marched down to the west bank of the river Jhelum, alongside an additional 5,000 men commanded by Umbi. The kings subjugated by him had sent contingents of their best troops to serve under him. He also hired several mercenary tribes. His last great battle, against a formidable Indian king and his vast army, was about to take place. By mid-May, he had reached Jhelum and encamped opposite to Purav's camp on the opposite bank. Purav had already sent detachments to guard all parts of the river, where it could be easily crossed. Alexander observed that it was impossible for him to cross the river at that place because Purav had many elephants and his army was ready to attack the Macedonians the moment they landed. Hence, he decided to search for another place where the river could be crossed easily. After searching for weeks, Alexander therefore decided to lead majority of his army at night and attempt a crossing at a place about 30 kilometers up north which his scouts had deemed suitable. This place was at a bend in the river, and on the opposite side was an island densely covered with forest. Here, a violent thunderstorm hit them, and they also discovered, to their horror, that the island did not touch the eastern bank. In summers, the river flow was massive because of rains and melting snow from the mountains. But somehow, Alexander's army crossed the river by sunrise. Having crossed the river, Alexander ordered his infantry to follow him at ordinary pace and led his cavalry rapidly towards Purav's camp. The horse archers were also ordered to hurry to give support to the cavalry. Hearing the news of a large portion of Alexander's army crossing the river, Purav sent one of his sons with about 60 chariots and 1,000 cavalry to confront them. They met Alexander nearly midway from Purav's camp and Alexander's landing place. The young prince was outnumbered, getting no time to form a defensive line, as Alexander quickly attacked with his cavalry and horse archers. He was killed with 400 of his men, and all their chariots were captured, having been stuck in the wet mud. Rest of his men fled back. When the men who had escaped from this rout reported back to Purav that Alexander himself had crossed the river with the strongest division of his army and that his son had been killed, he was in two minds about what to do next, as a division had been left behind in the Alexander's camp right opposite to his own position, and it appeared to be crossing the river. He at last decided to march with most of his forces against Alexander and meet him in battle. He took majority of his men with him and left a small number alongside some elephants to stop the enemy from crossing. Both the armies came face to face on a dry plain. Seeing the enemy, Alexander made his cavalry halt. Purav had posted his elephants in the front line at intervals of at least 100 feet, and his best infantry filled those intervals. Rest of his infantry formed a second line behind them. Cavalry was posted on both sides of the infantry, and the chariots were placed in front of it. Alexander concentrated most of his cavalry on his right. His center was made up of light infantry and the famous Macedonian phalanx. He posted his hoplites on his left. The initiative was taken by Alexander himself. He dispatched his horse archers. They attacked in squadrons and rained arrows upon Pourov's left and his center as well. Capitalizing on the ensuing confusion, Alexander himself marched with his cavalry to attack the enemy before they could reform their lines. As soon as Pourov's left was attacked, the Macedonian phalanx advanced and attacked his center. Pourov's elephants created havoc. Alexander, seeing his phalanx struggle against the elephants, dispatched his light infantry and they threw javelins and spears at the elephants and their mahouts. This was successful in pushing the elephants back, and many mahouts were killed. The phalanx pressed forward once again. Seeing his left being destroyed, Pourov redirected chariots and cavalry from his right to his left. Alexander commanded his remaining cavalry, kept in reserve, to encircle Pourov's center and attack his left from behind. This at once threw Pourov's left into confusion, and his outnumbered cavalry was no match for Macedonian cavalry, whose large Scythian horses gave them a considerable advantage over smaller Indian ponies. It broke and the survivors fled. The whole of Alexander's cavalry, which had now been gathered into one battalion, created havoc against the Pourov's center. The elephants, now confined within a narrow space, and many without their drivers, did more damage to friends than to foes. The Macedonians, who had a wide and open field to operate, gave way when the elephants charged and followed them and attacked them from behind when they retreated, whereas the Indians, who were in the midst among the animals, suffered far more the effects of their rage. Most of the Pourov's cavalry was dead, but the heaviest slaughter was among his infantry. They were hopelessly butchered, as their enormous bows could not be strung by resting one end on the soft ground, and the Macedonian spears were much longer than the Indian swords. The Macedonians surrounded the remnants of Pourov's army from every side. Many soldiers of the Pourov's army started fleeing for their lives. In the meanwhile, Crateros arrived with his phalanx. These men, being fresh, made a huge slaughter. When Pourov saw this rout, he did not abandon the field like the great Darius, but fought on as long as he saw any of his soldiers putting up a fight. He began to hurl javelins from his elephant and wounded many, but he suffered multiple wounds in the process. His mahout, seeing his injured condition, turned his elephant round and began to flee. Alexander pursued, but his horse, being injured, could not give chase. In the meantime, Umbi, whom Alexander had sent on to capture Pourov, advised him not to resist, but to surrender. But Pourov, on seeing his old enemy, turned round and threw his javelin at him. And he would have probably killed Umbi had he not instantly moved his horse and gotten out of the reach of Pourov. At last he was captured and brought before Alexander. Alexander asked Pourov how he wished to be treated. Pourov replied, "Treat me as a king would treat another king." Alexander was so pleased with his reply and hugely impressed with his bravery that he not only appointed Pourov to govern his own territory, but added new areas under his command. Such was the result of the battle in which Alexander fought against Pourov. Around 12,000 of Pourov's soldiers were killed and 9,000 were taken prisoners. On the Macedonian side, losses were minimal, around 1,000 killed, mainly in the center. After the battle, Alexander founded two cities, one on the battlefield and the other at the point he had started to cross the river Jalem. Similar to Pourov, new regions were added under the command of Umbi. Alexander marched further ahead with his army, but soon his men revolted, probably at the prospect of fighting against even larger and ferocious Indian forces. Pourov crushed down a rebellion against him by his nephew and continued ruling his kingdom. His name had already been etched into the golden pages of history on account of his bravery in the face of annihilation. We are working on bringing many more such stories to you in the future. Subscribe to our channel to not miss out on them. Until next time.